everybody just kind of laughed and wrote it off, and nobody wanted to sleep in this spare room there anymore. I'm still a skeptic myself, like I said. Even if you told me, I don't know that I'd believe you. If I watch myself and listen to myself, I'm not sure I believe myself.
What happens when death becomes personal? We hear about dying, we see it in the movies. But for many, death isn't real until we lose somebody we love. And then the questions start. Is there life after death? Have our loved ones gone on to a better place? Hi, I'm Lawrence Shaw. Welcome to Ghostly Encounters. Today we'll talk about the comfort we get from feeling like those questions have been answered. And we'll meet two women who say that comfort for them came from beyond the grave. When we're grieving, we just want to know that the person we lost is okay. And once in a while, we find someone who feels they've been granted that very wish. Someone like Pauline Leach.
I lived in Toronto for years, then I moved up to Albin, and I lived in Albin for about 5 years, I guess. And Annie and Poppy, Helen and Wilf, lived next door to us. Helen had been bedridden for a couple of years there. She was very sick. She died in '99. I guess the fall of 2000, we moved down to Newmarket. And Wilf moved to Albin, which is a small town just outside of Trout Lake. We'd go back and use the house as a cottage after that time. So we were back up there in 2001, I guess in the spring. And Merv and I were up with the dog, Lou. Got in Friday night, probably around 11, 12 o'clock, because it's so far from Toronto. Woke up the next morning, around 6 or 7, hearing someone in the house. We heard the side door open and someone walk down the hall and stand outside the bedroom. So we jump out of bed and says, Merv, you better get dressed, someone's out there. So he jumps up, throws his pants on, goes outside, and there's nobody in the hall. He walks down the hall, looks down the stairs, checks the whole house, and there was no one in the kitchen and there was no one in the basement. There was nothing except the sounds. It was just distinct footsteps down the hall, and they stopped right outside the bedroom door. And it was hardwood floor, so you could hear the steps nice and clear. So we thought, well, it must have been the dog. But Lou was sleeping in her normal spot in the kitchen. She had a blanket and a nice little bed there. She hadn't moved. She just looks up at us like we're nuts. You know, you hear a sound in the house, a crash, and you think, what was it? And later on, you might remember it was something in the freezer that fell. You can tell by that sound. So we wrote it off to being something we just couldn't identify for now, but there'd be a logical explanation for it, we thought. We were back up in June, and we didn't have Lou with us this time. And again, 6 or 7 in the morning, we woke up, and we heard someone come in the side door, walk down the hall, and stand outside the bedroom. So Merv looks at me and says, did you hear that? I said, yeah. We figured it must be Poppy. He had his own key. He would sometimes come in to visit. He didn't know we were coming up, but maybe he saw the car late at night. I don't know. So Merv jumps out, walks down the hall, and again, there's no one there. No one in the kitchen, no one in the basement, and the door is still locked. Why does a ghost need to open a door? I think they can walk through, but we did hear a door the second time. And then the walking down the hall. But there was no dog with us. So we never told anybody about these stories. We just wrote it off to being coincidence, something. We couldn't identify what it was, but there has to be a logical reason. You just don't hear footsteps when no one's there. We were back up in October that year. So Merv and my youngest son, Grant, are out hunting, and Craig, my second youngest, is in the house with me, and we're preparing dinner and setting the table and getting everything ready for Thanksgiving dinner. And finally, when everything was ready, Craig and I went downstairs to the bar to make ourselves a drink. The rec room is right underneath the kitchen. So we pour ourselves a drink. We hadn't had any yet. And we heard a sound upstairs. The sound was the chair being pulled out from the table. So I said to Craig, did you hear that? And Craig says, yeah. I said, well, what was it? Craig says, well, someone moved a chair upstairs. And I said, well, Craig, who's in the house? Craig didn't know about these other stories either. So Craig says, well, someone obviously came in when we came downstairs. So I said, do you want to go and check and let me know who's up there? So Craig goes upstairs, and of course no one's there. I didn't hear anybody come in the house. I would have heard the side door open, so I knew there was no one there, but I wanted him to check it out just to make sure. So I said, well, Craig, you're not going to believe this. And I went and told him the story about the other 2 times. So we go out to the garage to find Merv and Grant. They're back from hunting. They're out in the garage. And we want to go for a walk in the bush to pick some leaves up for decorations for the fall table. Grant's going to go in the house and have a shower. Turned the shower off and was getting dried off, and he heard someone, the same thing that we had heard. Someone walk down the hall and stand outside the bathroom door. So we get back from our leaf collection, and Grant comes back outside. He says, well, who was just in the house? I said, well, nobody was in the house. Yeah, he says, somebody walked down the hall and stood outside the bathroom door. He says, I called, no one answered. He says, so I waited for a while, then I stuck my head out and went to my room. But who was in there? And if I'd told him the story, I would have thought, oh, well, he's just imagining because we told him. But since we hadn't told him the story already, and he heard the same thing that we heard, but, oh, wow, there's something happening here. Merv said, well, it's Nanny. She's come back to see us. You know, this was when Annie died, and so she's come back to say, hi, I'm okay. The other thing that we went back and realized after Thanksgiving was Nanny's birthday. So the day that we heard the 2 sounds at the kitchen table and when Grant was in the washroom was Nanny's birthday. And then when Merv went back and said, oh my goodness, we were up for Father's Day, whether it was Father's Day or Poppy's birthday, they were both around the same time. And July was the second time, and July was when Annie died, July 2nd. People asked, how could it be Nanny? She didn't die in this house. Nanny died next door in her house, in her bed, which she'd been in for a couple of years. She was very ill at the end. So they said, well, why would she be in this house? Merv says, well, she must have come to visit us, I guess. You know, she missed us. Hopefully she was happy to come back and see us. It wasn't upset with something. It felt comforting to know that she's there, I guess, around, has the ability to come back, has the ability to say hi. Anyways, we never talked much about it, and a month or 2 later, I was driving to work, and all of a sudden, the hairs in the back of my neck stood up, and I thought, oh man, I know how she'd be in the house. She died next door, Poppy moved to Alvin, and we had taken all our furniture down to Newmarket. So we brought the hospital bed that Nanny died in and put it in a room and made the room up for Poppy so he'd have a place to stay in our house when he came. And then it made sense. The bed that she died in was in our house. So I guess that was the common link. We went back and tried to trace the time of when the noises stopped. Was the bed being removed or was it Poppy dying? They all happened almost around the same time, so I don't know. But we never heard anything else after that. And I think she's gone now. For Poppy, or just had some time. But if we could open our mind, it's kind of, like I said, comforting to know that there is something else out there after this. Which I truly believe there has to be something more than this. I mean, we can't be all put down here to run like crazy people for 80 years or whatever it is. Which goes like in a nanosecond, it's gone.
Pauline still questions what she heard, but 3 other members of her family heard the same thing. And so Pauline has come to believe that she had a ghostly encounter, a comforting visit from her beloved mother-in-law, Helen. Pauline could be you or me. There's no real reason why a ghost would visit her in particular. There's no family or traditional history of second sight, no childhood habit of ghost whispering. But Pauline's family is a loving, close-knit group. Maybe it isn't so surprising that she feels Helen would want to join their gatherings at the cottage. Pauline's story follows the tradition of the benevolent guardian angel. That springs from a common attitude that God is far removed from our daily lives. And so for some, angels, saints, and departed loved ones bring spiritual comfort. When Stacy Haluka, a young woman from small-town Ontario, lost a friend to suicide, she needed that comfort.
I grew up in Welland. in a small town outside of there where I grew up was Cook's Mills. It was great growing up out on the farm, and we always had little campouts, and like I said, we had 3 acres of land and surrounded by trees, and we'd have little seances in the backyard and try to scare each other. I typically watched horror movies, still do. My mother does not like it, and I would rent horror movies, and she would be either vacuuming or playing the organ just so she wouldn't have to hear the horror music. I just liked being scared. I like the supernatural. I always believe there's something outside of what we see. I wanted to tell you my story because it's a true one, and if I can make somebody else be open to it and believe in it, and it can happen, it can be a comforting experience, especially if someone you lost that you loved has moved on.
Stacy was still in her teens when tragedy struck, and death became real to her. But in the midst of her sorrow, Stacy found unexpected comfort. And like Pauline, her strange experience helped encourage her belief in a supernatural world.
My friend Monty, he was actually my brother's friend. They were 6 years older than I was. He was more of another big brother to me, a friend and looking out for me. He always wanted to know who I was with, where I was going, and if I was dating a boy, he'd want to know what his intentions were and where he was taking me and what was going on as well. It was good to have around. The boys were having a party one night, and Monty was leaving the party with his friend Kevin, and on the way home they ditched the car. The car went off the road and they ended up in the ditch. Monty took off running down the road. By the time Kevin had taken off after him, Monty was quite a ways ahead of him, and Kevin assumed he had gone to the local garage to get the tow truck, so that's the direction Kevin went in. When he realized that Monty wasn't there, he turned around to go towards Monty's house, and on the way there heard the gunshot. Monty went into the house and grabbed a gun and shot himself in the head in the backyard. He was somewhat withdrawn from his friends. Not sure exactly what was going on in his life to make him do that, though. I was devastated. I was working afternoons at the time and would go to visit a friend after, and that was the main road back to my house. So I drove by that cemetery every night. After Monty was buried there, every night I drove by, the street light would blink off and then on. As I was approaching in my car, the light would go off, and as I passed, I'd look in my rearview mirror and it would go on. I paid attention ever since that first time. It was that entire summer, every night I drove by, that light did that. I knew it was him. I don't know how, but somehow I knew it was him. It made me believe that he was still around, and I wasn't upset so much anymore as comforted in knowing that. The last time the light blinked on and off. I was on my way home, and as I approached the light, it had blinked off, and every window in my car fogged up for probably 5-10 seconds, but it seemed a lot longer. Every window in my car had fogged up. I couldn't see out of my windows, and it may have lasted 5 or 10 seconds, I'm not sure. And as the windows cleared and I looked in the rearview mirror, the light came back on, and that was the last time that it ever blinked. I didn't know what was happening at the time, and the windows kind of scared me, but then I knew, and when that light blinked back on and the next night it didn't, I knew what had happened. Every night I was waiting, hoping that it just might do it again, and it didn't. It was kind of like the end, like I had seen the last of him or heard the last of him. It made me sad again, knowing that he wouldn't be around. I didn't tell anybody until I had gone to see a psychic. At the end of the reading, he had asked me if there was anything else I wanted to know, and I said no. And he said, yes, there is. And I said, okay. And he said, you want to know about the light? He said, you want to know about the light? So I just kind of got a chill, and I said, okay. And he said, what happened to him? What happened to his head? I said, he shot himself in the head. And he said, did he drive a red sports car? And I said, yes, he used to race a sports car. He said, the light, he said, when it was blinking, he was letting you know that he was still watching over you and taking care of you. And that last night, he was letting you know that he was going to be leaving and moving on, that he couldn't stay here with you anymore. And not until then that I had some sort of proof that I wasn't crazy did I tell my friends. And I didn't even tell my family until a few weeks ago, after all these years of me not telling them and coming out and telling them that this had happened. It sort of blew them away, and they were glad that it happened. I truly believe, even though I always have, but now more than ever, I know that people are out there taking care of others and watching over us. There are angels, and there is a supernatural world that we have no idea about. Everybody has their own beliefs, whether it's supernatural or God or Buddha or who it may be that they need to believe in. And some people close off any other options. I've always kind of waited for something like that to happen and hoped that it would, to prove that there is an afterlife. There is more out there than what we see. Our loved ones may die physically, but they're still looking out for us. They're still there spiritually.
Helen looked in on Pauline's family. Monty was like a big brother to Stacy, even in death. Both women were comforted by a ghostly encounter. Sometimes the living will fixate on their dead loved ones as a way of postponing the grief process. Both our psychologists note that neither Pauline nor Stacy did this. They both accepted the death. They considered it a gift, knowing that Helen and Monty, though dead, still seemed to be spiritually present in this world. Many of us in the Western world live our lives in linear time. We have a past, a present, and a future. It's hard to conceive of time in any other way. That's one of the reasons we have so much trouble accepting the idea of a supernatural world. Unlike the West, some cultures see time as a series of circles that intersect. The dead are simply in a different circle, one that exists simultaneously within our own. And so they believe there is a road between these worlds that is open to spirits who know the way. For Pauline and Stacy, the ghost that they believe found that road also helped ease their loss, and they confirmed a belief in an afterlife that makes death just a little less frightening.
And so everybody asked, were you afraid? I said, I wasn't afraid of Nanny when she was alive, so we weren't afraid of her. We thought it was kind of comforting to know that she might be around or be able to see us or say hi.
There's nothing to be afraid of. It's a comforting experience if it's someone you love.